The rain beat heavily against the windows of the police station as the clock struck 11:47 p.m. Sergeant James Sullivan, 62 years old and just 3 days away from retirement, watched young recruit Mark Johnson fight off sleep as he reviewed reports for the 10th time that night. "The coffee's gone cold, kid," James said, his hoarse voice breaking the silence that was only interrupted by the steady patter of rain on the roof. Mark lifted his head, his eyes red with tiredness. "Sorry, Sergeant. It's just nothing happens these nights, you know. I keep wondering if I chose the right career." James gave a bitter smile and lit his cigarette, one of the last vices he allowed himself after 40 years of service. "Nothing happening," he repeated, slowly exhaling the smoke. "Let me tell you something, Johnson. You're lucky to be bored. Very lucky." The veteran sergeant stood up, his joints creaking with the movement, and walked to the old metal filing cabinet in the corner of the room. He opened the bottom drawer, the one everyone in the precinct knew they shouldn't touch, and took out a folder yellowed with age. "See these 4 folders here?" James placed the documents on the table, each marked with a different date: 1989, 1993, 1996, and 2004. In 40 years of service, I've seen it all. Brutal murders, shootings, high-speed chases, kidnappings, you name it, I've seen it all. But these 4 calls, he paused, his eyes fixed on the folders. "These 4 haunt me to this day." Mark straightened up in his chair, his weariness momentarily forgotten. "What kind of calls, Sergeant?" James pulled up a chair and sat down slowly, like a man about to tell something he'd rather keep buried. "They all involve isolated cabins, places where people go to escape civilization, to find peace, solitude, or just disappear from the world. But sometimes what they find there is something far worse than anything civilization could offer." He opened the first folder, revealing old photos and typed reports. "I'm going to tell you these stories, Johnson, all of them. But I'm warning you, after you hear what I'm about to say, you'll never look at a cabin in the woods the same way again. And maybe, just maybe, you'll be grateful for those boring nights." Mark pushed his mug of cold coffee aside and leaned forward. "I'm listening, Sergeant." James took a long drag on his cigarette, his eyes lost in memories he'd rather forget. "So let's start with the first one. It was November 1989, and I was only 29 years old. Story 1. The Cursed Inheritance. The Wild Man of the Mountain. I was just a patrol officer when that call came in," James began, opening the first folder and spreading old photos across the table. "I didn't have much experience yet, you know. I thought I'd seen it all after 5 years on the streets. What an idiot I was." 911 recording, 2:47 a.m., November 15th, 1989. Operator. 911, what is your emergency? "Woman, I need to report a dangerous man. Please, someone needs to know about this." Operator. "Ma'am, please calm down. Where are you now?" "Woman, I'm on the road, near the Klamath River, Black Marble Mountain area, near Happy Camp. I walked all night. Oh my God, I walked all night through the forest." Operator. "Are you injured? Do you need medical assistance?" Woman. "No, I'm not hurt. But that man, he was banging his head against the door, repeatedly, and shouting my father's name." Operator. "Which man, ma'am? Is your father with you?" Woman, voice breaking. "My father is dead. He died 7 months ago. But there's a man in his cabin, a wild, naked man with dirty, tangled red hair. He kept banging his head against the cabin door, again and again." Operator. "Ma'am, I need you to take a deep breath and give me your exact location. I'll send a patrol car." Woman. "I'm at a rafting company. Cottage Grove, I think. I left my car here before going to the cabin. There was blood and saliva on the cabin door when I left. He was circling the cabin all night." Operator. Unit 23, Unit 23. Please respond. We have a possible 1054 disturbed individual Black Marble Mountain region. "I was Unit 23, James said, lighting another cigarette. "We got the call and went there, me and my partner at the time, Dave Morrison. We found the woman sitting on the porch of the rafting company, wrapped in a thermal blanket that the staff there had given her. She was shivering, but not from the cold. "How was she?" Mark asked. "Deeply shocked," James replied. "Hair disheveled, clothes torn from branches, knees scraped from falling during the night walk. But the worst thing was her eyes. Completely empty, you know. As if she'd seen something that broke something inside her." James pulled a photo from the folder. A woman in her 30s, with brown hair, staring intently at the camera with a distant expression. Her name was Sarah Mitchell. She told us the whole story while we waited for the search team to arrive. Her father, Robert Mitchell, had died 7 months earlier of a heart attack. And when the family was dealing with the inheritance, they discovered he had this secluded cabin near Black Marble Mountain, a property no one knew existed. "Not even his wife," Mark interrupted. "Not even his wife. And look, they were married for over 20 years before the divorce, but this place, it was a complete secret." The lawyer said it was just a one-room cabin built on a small plot of land, about 8 kilometers down a trail from the nearest road. James flipped through some papers. Sarah told me she had decided to visit the cabin, against her mother's wishes. She wanted to understand what her father was doing there. She spent months planning the trip, buying equipment, studying maps, preparing. She wasn't the adventurous type, you know? She grew up in resorts and spas, but she was determined. And what did she find there? At first, just an old, moldy cabin, but when he went inside, James pulled out more photos, images from the crime scene showing the interior of the cabin. It was like entering the mind of an obsessed man. The photos showed walls covered in topographical maps, all scribbled with notes, dates, and times. Red circles marked specific locations. Lines connected different points. And the photos, James continued, pulling out numbered evidence. There were photos everywhere, all of the same man, a red-haired guy, healthy-looking in the first photos. But as you looked at the others, you could see the deterioration. His hair getting longer and wilder, his body thinner, his eyes more absent. Was her father tracking this man? Exactly. There were notes like, "Found him sleeping here," in certain squares on the map. "Human feces, food," in another location. And then there was one that gave me chills. "Almost saw me, very close." The last 2 words were in capital letters, with so much force that the pencil had torn the paper. Mark leaned forward to see the photos more closely. And the gun. Yes. Sarah found a .44 revolver in the desk drawer, loaded, along with a box full of ammunition. She told me that's when she realized her father wasn't just tracking this man. He was afraid of him. James paused to take a sip of his now cold coffee. Sarah spent the day exploring the area, trying to understand why her father had chosen that specific location. She didn't find anything special, just ordinary forest. But she decided to spend the night there anyway. "Bad idea," Mark muttered. "The worst idea," James agreed. She told me she slept for a few hours, but woke up startled around 2:30 in the morning. She had heard a noise outside. Let me read to you what she said in her formal statement. James pulled out a typed document and began to read slowly. "At first, I thought it was a curious animal, maybe a bear sniffing out leftover food. But then I heard footsteps. They weren't 4-legged steps. They were 2-legged steps, steady, deliberate, like someone walking in circles around the cabin. I grabbed the gun I'd found in the drawer and went to the window, a small opening where my father had put a wooden shutter. I opened it slowly and shone my flashlight outside. That's when I saw him. He was completely naked, covered in dirt and soot. The red hair I had seen in the photos was even longer now, reaching down to the middle of his back, all tangled and full of leaves and twigs. He had a disheveled beard and was thin, dangerously thin. You could see his ribs through the dirt, but the worst part was the way he moved. He wasn't like a normal human. He was more primitive. He circled the cabin with steady steps, like an animal in a ritual. And when my light hit him, he didn't react. He didn't even blink. He just kept walking. I yelled at him. I told him I was armed, that he should leave. But he acted as if I hadn't said anything. He just kept circling, that rhythmic swaying, those barefoot steps on the ground. Then suddenly, he stopped. He became completely still. And in that moment of total silence, I just knew that something very bad was about to happen. He exploded into motion, from 0 to 100 in an instant. He came running straight for the cabin door with inhuman speed. I closed the blinds and pointed the gun at the door, praying that those metal plates Dad had installed would hold. The footsteps stopped right at the door. Silence. Then it began. Banging. Not with his fists. I would recognize the sound of punches. They were louder, heavier, right at head level. He was banging his skull against the wooden door. Again and again and again. Thud, thud, thud. I yelled at him to stop. I said he wasn't my father, that my dad had died, that I was leaving in the morning and would never come back. The banging stopped. Then I heard a voice. It was a hoarse croak, like someone who hadn't used their vocal cords in years. But it was clear enough. He said my father's name, Robert. I repeated that Dad was dead. The voice came again, a little louder. Robert, Robert, Robert. I started screaming, yelling that my father was dead, that I didn't know what was happening, that I didn't want to hurt anyone. Silence returned. Then I heard the footsteps receding, becoming quieter and quieter until they disappeared completely into the night. But I couldn't move. I stood there frozen, trembling, with the gun pointed at the door, until I finally managed to force myself to move. I gathered my things and left. The door was soaked. Blood and saliva dripped down the wood. I walked all night. Every shadow was him. Every sound was his footsteps. I turned my flashlight and gun in every direction hundreds of times. I honestly thought I would have to kill someone that night. I thank God it didn't come to that. James put the paper back in the folder. We went to the cabin at dawn with a search team of 6 men, all armed. Sarah guided us along the trail. It took us almost 5 hours to get there. And what did you find? Exactly as she described. The door had deep marks, scratches, cavities where the wood had splintered from repeated impact. And yes, there was dried blood and what appeared to be saliva or drool. The metal plates on the inside were dented. James pulled up photos of the scene. Inside, it was disturbing. Maps covered all the walls. He had his own system, different colors for different types of sightings. Red for direct eye contact, blue for signs of presence, footprints, droppings, food scraps, green for sounds, screams, movements in the forest, and black was for aggressive behavior. Did it have many black marks? Mark asked. More than 100 in the last 2 years before Robert Mitchell's death. His obsession was escalating. He had notes showing that he was spending 3 or 4 nights a week in that cabin, and always armed. Did you find the red-haired man? James shook his head slowly. We found footprints, barefoot footprints around the cabin, exactly as Sarah described. We also found a makeshift campsite about 2 kilometers away. Just some stones forming a circle for a campfire, small animal bones, and human feces. But what about man himself? He disappeared. We sent teams for 3 weeks. Nothing. It was as if he were a ghost. James lit another cigarette. But here's the part that really haunts me, kid. I called the ranger station to ask if they'd received any reports of a wild man in that area. Do you know what they told me? Mark waited in silence. They had been receiving reports for 15 years. 15 years. Johnson. Campers, hikers, fishermen, all reporting encounters with a red-haired, naked man with erratic behavior. The first report was from 1974. 1974? Mark repeated, incredulous. Exactly. And do you know when Robert Mitchell divorced his wife and started building that cabin, 1975? a year after the first reports. Do you think he knew the man? That's why he was looking for him? I'm sure of it, James replied. We found an old newspaper clipping in one of the cabin drawers. It was about a 22-year-old named Thomas Brennan who disappeared while hiking solo in the Rocky Mountains in 1973. The article's photo showed a young man with curly red hair and a wide smile. The same person from the first photos in the cabin. Did Robert know Thomas? They were childhood friends, we later found out. They grew up together in Crescent City. Thomas was known for being a free spirit, always talking about dropping everything and living in nature. And then, in 1973, he simply left. He left a note saying he was going to find the truth in the mountains and never came back. And Robert spent the next few years looking for him, Mark added, searching and documenting, because Thomas didn't return as the person he was. He returned as something else. Something he barely remembered as a human being. James pulled out more documents. I got permission to access Thomas's psychiatric records from when he was a teenager. He had been diagnosed with schizophrenia at 16, but refused to continue treatment at 18. He said the doctors wanted to kill his true nature, so he was sick even before he went to the mountains. And he spent more than 15 years without medication, without treatment, living completely isolated. His mind simply crumbled, and Robert, for some reason we'll never fully understand, felt it was his responsibility to find him. James slowly closed the folder. Sarah sold the property 3 months later for a fraction of its value. The buyer was a land speculator who never even visited the place. As far as I know, the cabin is still there, rotting away. And Thomas, the red-haired man, he was never found. Reports continued sporadically for a few more years. The last confirmed sighting was in 1995. After that, James shrugged. Either he died out there, or he went too deep into the forest. Either way, he became part of the local legend, the wild man of Black Marble. Parents used the story to scare their children and keep them away from the forest. But you believe he was real. I saw the evidence, kid. I saw the footprints, the blood on the door. I read the hundreds of pages of Robert's documentation. Yes, he was real, and maybe he still is, somewhere out there in the mountains, completely oblivious to what it means to be human. Mark shuddered involuntarily. James gave a humorless smile, and that was just the first story. Want to hear the second? Story 2, The Diary of Madness, 15 Years of Isolation. Mark got up to make fresh coffee while James opened the second folder. The clock on the wall read 1:15 a.m. The rain had lessened to a steady drizzle. The second call came in September 1993, James began. I was already a sergeant at that time, working at the Seattle precinct. It was supposed to be my day off, but the lieutenant called me saying there was something I needed to see in person. Recording of 911, 6:23 a.m., September 6, 1993. Operator, 911. What is your emergency, young man? Nervous voice. I don't know if this is exactly an emergency, but we need to report something very disturbing that we found. Operator, what is your name and location, sir? Man, Steve Morrison. We're in the parking lot of the convenience store in Fairholme, in Olympic National Park. We found an abandoned cabin in the woods yesterday. Operator, and why does this require police assistance, sir? Man, there was a diary there, from someone who had been living completely alone in the forest since 1978, and the entries, man, they show someone going insane over 15 years, and that's not all. We heard a horrible scream coming from the forest last night. A scream that wasn't human, but it wasn't animal either. Man, my friends think the guy from the diary is still around, and after reading what he wrote, he's dangerous. Operator, did you remove any belongings from the cabin? Man, no. We didn't touch anything except the diary, and I kind of read it, but we put it back exactly where it was. Operator, I'm dispatching a unit. Please remain where you are. I arrived at Olympic Park around 10 a.m. James continued. I found 4 young college students in the parking lot, Steve Morrison, who made the call, and 3 of his friends. They were all clearly shaken. They hadn't slept well. What did they tell you? They had gone on a camping trip before the start of classes. They wanted a real adventure, like into the wild. They chose Olympic Park because it was nearby and had extensive wilderness areas. They went off the main trail and ended up finding this cabin. James spread aerial photos of the park across the table. The cabin was here. He pointed to a densely forested area, about 6 kilometers from the marked trail. Completely isolated. Were they simply lost? Partially. They knew the general direction they wanted to follow, but they weren't on the official trail. And then, after hours of walking among the trees, they found the cabin, so dilapidated and overgrown that it almost completely blended into the forest. James pulled out more photos, these taken at the scene later. It looked completely abandoned. The roof was covered in dead leaves. Vines were climbing the walls. The windows were so dirty they looked opaque. But the door was unlocked. And the interior. It was like a failed survival time capsule. Old camping gear scattered everywhere, crumpled aluminum foil, a half-empty matchbox, a can of beans with a spoon still stuck inside, torn wrappers from granola bars, a spilled bag of dried fruit mix, an old stained backpack leaning against the wall. Did they decide to stay? They thought it was a rest stop for hikers, James explained. They decided to have lunch there before continuing to the viewpoint they wanted to see. That's when Steve decided to explore the room. James pulled out a sealed piece of evidence, a worn leather notebook. He found it in the 3rd drawer of the nightstand, underneath some empty medicine bottles. The diary. Exactly. Steve started reading out of curiosity, but became completely engrossed. He called one of his friends over to read with him, and as they read, they realized they weren't in just any relaxation area. They were in someone's house. Someone who had completely lost their sanity. James carefully opened the notebook, wearing gloves. Even after so many years, he treated it as active evidence. The first entry was dated March 3rd, 1978. James began to read. Today my true life begins. I have left behind the sick and corrupt world of modern civilization. This cabin will be my home. This forest will be my kingdom. I will document everything. Every day, every discovery, every lesson that nature teaches me. This journal will be my gift to those who come after, those who also seek to break free from the chains of society. The air here is pure. The water in the stream is crystal clear. The birds sing without fear. I am finally home. James flipped through a few pages. The first few weeks were filled with naive optimism. He wrote about building rabbit traps, fishing in the creek, identifying edible plants. He seemed genuinely happy. When did it start to change? Gradually. Around the 3rd month, he wrote about his first really difficult night. Heavy rain that flooded the cabin, intense cold, unable to light a fire. He spent the night shivering, questioning his decision. But the next morning, he wrote that it was just a test, that he needed to be stronger. James continued turning the pages, showing the evolution of the handwriting. See how the writing changes. It starts out elegant, almost artistic, but month after month, it becomes more careless, more erratic, and the content. In 1979, he wrote about food poisoning from undercooked meat. He was sick for 5 days, delirious with fever, thinking he was going to die alone. He survived, but something changed. He began to become more cautious, more paranoid. James found a specific entry. Day 284. I haven't seen another human being for 9 months. Sometimes I forget what my own voice sounds like. I talk to the trees now. They answer with the wind. It's a more honest conversation than any I've had in the city. I killed a deer today. As it died, I felt something strange. Like a part of me was dying too. Like I was killing something within myself. I cried while preparing the meat. I don't know why. He was starting to fall apart, Mark observed, and it only got worse. In 1980, the episodes became less frequent but more intense. He began writing about hearing voices when everything was silent. "Heaven sings to me," he wrote. "God speaks through the silence." James turned to 1981. That's when it started to get really disturbing. "I am no longer the person I was. That man died in the city. I am something new now, something purified. The world out there is rotten, but here I can save my soul. This is a cosmic war between light and darkness, and I have chosen my side." "Religious delusions," Mark commented, which escalated. In 1982, he wrote entire pages of rambling prose about hearing divine messages, about being chosen for a special mission. But he also had moments of frightening clarity where he recognized that he was losing his sanity and needed to return to civilization. But he never came back. He couldn't force himself. He wrote about trying several times to walk back, but he always stopped halfway down the trail, overcome with nausea and terror at the mere thought of seeing other people again. Then he would return to the cabin. James jumped to the mid-1980s. That's when it got really dark. The entries became short, angry, written with such force that they tore the paper. "God lied. The game is over. It wasn't me. Sick brain. Kill death. God of blood." What does this mean? Nobody knows. From 1987 onwards, many entries were just scribbles in shorthand that only he understood. Strange symbols, meaningless compound words. And the more you read, the more it seemed like text randomly generated by someone whose internal processor was malfunctioning. James turned to the last pages. 1989, 1990, 1991. The entries were becoming increasingly rare, sometimes only one a month. But they continued, and then he stopped at a page from 1993. Steve said that when he saw this date, he panicked. It was from 2 weeks earlier. The guy was still around, and he was completely insane. What did the entrance say? James read, "Autumn approaches again. 15 turns of the sun. I am no more. I am next. The truth of the rules. The path revealed. Visitors come. They always come. They don't understand. They can't. I was like them. Now I am beyond. The end beginning. Beginning the end." "That makes absolutely no sense," Mark said. "Exactly." And Steve realized that. He also realized it mentioned visitors. He and his friends were the visitors. They rushed back to the main room and said they needed to leave immediately. "They packed everything up in a hurry," James continued. But as they walked back to the campsite they had set up, paranoia grew. Every shadow on the trees seemed to be someone watching. Every noise in the forest sounded like footsteps. Did they see the owner of the cabin? Not during the day. They arrived at the camp at dusk, but they were too nervous to relax. They stayed around the campfire, talking in hushed voices, jumping at every strange sound. James took Steve's statement. Around 11 p.m., it was getting late, and they were starting to calm down. They thought that maybe the man was far away, or that the 15 years in the forest had taken him even deeper into the interior. But that wasn't the case. No. It was when they heard the scream. James paused, letting the weight of the sentence hang in the air. "Steve described me as a mixture of animal howl and human roar, full of rage and pain and utter madness. It echoed through the valley, making the birds take flight from the trees." He was the man from the diary. It had to be. And the scream came from the direction of the cabin. He had returned, found evidence that someone had been there, and was reacting. What did they do? They immediately put out the campfire, took down the tents without even bothering to fold them properly, threw everything into their backpacks, and started walking. In the dark, through dense forest, using only flashlights. James shook his head. They walked for 7 hours straight, without stopping, until they saw the lights of the convenience store. That's when they made the call. "And you went to investigate. We assembled a search team, 8 men, all armed. The boys guided us along the trail they had made. They left plenty of evidence of the path, broken branches, footprints in the mud, even a granola bar that someone had dropped." "Did you find the cabin?" We found it exactly where they said it was. And yes, it looked like it had been abandoned for a long time. But when we went inside, James pulled up photos of the scene. Everything was exactly as the boys described. The campsite trash, the maps, but there was something new, something that wasn't there when they visited. Mark looked at the photos and saw it. In the center of the table, arranged with obsessive care, was the deck of cards that had been scattered on the floor. Now it was in a perfect square pile. "He's back," Mark murmured. And he came back, saw that someone had been there, tidied up the letters, and probably saw us coming. The diary was back in the drawer, exactly where it should be. Did you look for him? For 3 whole days. We established a 5-kilometer search perimeter around the cabin. We used sniffer dogs, a helicopter with a thermal camera. Nothing. James lit another cigarette. But on the 3rd day, one of the dogs found something. A makeshift campsite about 3 kilometers from the cabin, just a few stones forming a circle, the cold ashes of a campfire, and something else. What? Bones. Hundreds of small bones, rabbits, squirrels, birds, piled up in a strange structure, almost like a sculpture. And in the center, stuck in the ground, was a piece of wood with something hanging from it. James showed him a picture. Mark leaned forward and felt his stomach churn. It was a deer skull, but it had been modified. Symbols had been carved into the bone, the same symbols that appeared on the final pages of the diary. "Madman's art," James said simply. "It's recent. The ashes still had traces of heat. So he was nearby. He was there, but we never found him. It was as if he knew the forest so intimately that he could disappear at will. And perhaps he did. 15 years living there. He probably knew every tree, every stone, every hole, and every animal trail. What happened to the cabin? We temporarily sealed it off as a crime scene, collected evidence, including the diary. We tried to identify the author through what he had written, but he was careful never to mention his full name. Only initials, M.K. Did no missing person respond? 3 possibilities in the Washington and Oregon area from 1975 to 1978. Martin Koslow, Matthew Keller, Mitchell Kemp, all men between 25 and 35 years old who disappeared without a trace, all with a history of mental health problems or erratic behavior. Did you investigate the families? We tried. Koslow was dead. Body found in 1982 in Los Angeles. Overdose. Keller was never confirmed. Family said he had talked about going to Alaska. But Kemp... James paused. Kemp was interesting. Why? His mother said that Mitchell had been diagnosed with schizophrenia at age 23. He refused treatment, saying he wasn't sick, that he was seeing the truth that others couldn't see. One day in 1977, he left a note saying he was going to find God in the forest and never returned. Didn't they ever try to look for it? They hired a private investigator for a year. He found evidence that Mitchell had spent some time at Happy Camp, buying camping supplies. After that, cold trail. And you think he's M.K.? It makes sense, chronologically. And the profile matches. Young man, untreated mental health issues, obsession with isolation and nature. But we could never confirm it 100%. James closed the folder. We left notices in the park about a potentially disturbed individual in the area. For several months, campers reported occasional sightings, a naked man watching from a distance, always fleeing when noticed. Last sighting, December 1993. After that, nothing. The winter of that year was particularly brutal. Lots of snow, sub-zero temperatures. I always thought that's when he finally died. 15 years was too long to survive like that. Or he went even deeper into the forest. Or that, James agreed. Either way, Olympic Park has thousands of acres of unexplored forest. If he's dead, the body will never be found. And if he's alive, he shrugged. Well, I hope he's found some peace, but I doubt it. Mark looked at the sealed diary. This is truly frightening, Sergeant, to think that someone could deteriorate like this, alone, for so long, and the madness of being meticulously documented, James added. Page by page, year after year, the gradual descent from human to something less human. It's like watching a shipwreck in slow motion. And there are two more stories. The worst ones yet, James said, opening the third folder. Because in the first two, at least the madmen were victims of their own madness. In the next one, the madness was calculated and deliberate. Story 3. The final meeting. Poison among friends. Mark stood up to stretch his legs. It was almost 2 a.m. now, and the police station was completely silent, except for the rain, which had started falling heavily again. "Do you need a break?" James asked. "No," Mark replied, sitting down again. "I want to hear them all before dawn." James smiled slightly. "Good, because this one still gives me nightmares to this day. It was in August 1996. 901 recording, 1:34 a.m., August 17th, 1996. Operator 911, what is the emergency? Man, there are very sick people here. 4 people, they're vomiting blood. Operator, sir, where exactly are you located? Man, I'm the night porter at the Barren Mountain Cabins in Montana. Cabin number 9. They ate something and now they're... Good heavens, there's blood everywhere. Operator, are the victims conscious? Man, 2 are unconscious. 1 is in the sink vomiting something reddish-brown. The 4th was outside. She fell on the floor near the office. Operator, do not touch the victims or the vomit. Ambulances are already on their way. Can you tell me what they ate? Man, there are bottles of wine everywhere, food on the table. It looks like they had a big meal, but I don't know what specifically. Sound of vomiting in the background. Operator, sir, please move away from the area. It may be contagious. Man, oh God, oh my God, I already knocked on the door. Operator, calm down. Wash your hands immediately and keep your distance. Help is on the way. I was the sergeant on duty that night, James said. I received the call over the radio while I was doing a routine patrol. I arrived at the Barren Mountain Cabins at the same time as the first ambulances, 4 of them, with flashing lights, speeding up that mountain road. 4 ambulances for 4 victims? Mark asked. The dispatcher thought it could be a terrorist attack or something chemical. Better safe than sorry. When I arrived, I found the night doorman, a 19-year-old boy named Derek Palmer, sitting on the office steps, completely in shock. James showed a photo of the place. It was a small complex of rental cabins in the mountains, the kind of place families visit in the summer. Very peaceful, very secluded. 10 cabins in total, scattered among the trees. And Cabana 9? It was the furthest one, at the top of the property. When I got there with the paramedics, James paused, his eyes distant. It looked like a scene from a horror movie. He spread photos of the scene across the table. Mark leaned over and immediately wished he hadn't done that. The interior of cabin number 9 was covered in reddish-brown vomit. On the walls, on the floor, in the kitchen sink. 2 people were lying on the floor, one on the sofa, the other on the floor. A 3rd was bent over the sink. The 4th had already been taken away by the first paramedics. The smell, James said quietly. Blood, bile, feces, and something else. Something chemical. It burned my nose just going in there. Did you use protection? Masks and gloves, yes. The paramedics too. They stabilized the victims quickly, 2 women and 2 men, all between 45 and 50 years old, all presenting the same symptoms: severe vomiting, intense abdominal pain, seizures, internal bleeding, food poisoning. That was my first suspicion, but the head paramedic said it was more serious. This is poisoning, he told me. And whoever did this used something very strong. James pulled out more photos. The dining table still had the remains of the meal. It looked like it had been some kind of festive dinner. Beautiful plates, candles, wine glasses. There was half a roast chicken, scalloped potatoes, salad, and artisan bread. And the poison was in the food. Exactly. But here's what made it all the more sinister. There were 5 places at the table. 5 plates, 5 bowls, 5 sets of cutlery, but only 4 victims. Mark understood immediately. The 5th person was the one who prepared the food. And who poisoned everyone? James confirmed. While the paramedics took the victims away, I started investigating. Derek, the doorman, told me that the group had checked in on Thursday afternoon, 3 days earlier. It was a woman from Washington who had organized a kind of reunion with old friends. Do you have her name? Linda Harrison, James said, opening a report. 52 years old, resident of Spokane, Washington. Reserved the cabin for a week, paid in advance in cash. Arrived with many bags. Derek remembered because he helped carry them and commented on how many supplies she had brought. Did she arrive alone? Yes. The other 3 arrived separately the following day, Friday. Derek recorded their license plates. 1 car from Seattle, 1 from Portland, 1 from Boise. They all confirmed they were friends of Linda's for a reunion weekend. And they trusted her enough to eat the food she prepared. Absolutely. Judging by the leftovers, it had been an elaborate meal. Linda had spent hours cooking. There was even a dessert pie in the refrigerator. James pointed to a detail in the photos. Do you see this wine glass here? It's clean, with no sediment at the bottom. All the others have a strange sediment. Linda was careful not to drink from the same batch she served to the others. She knew exactly what she was doing. Oh, absolutely. When we inspected the kitchen more carefully, we found 2 things hidden under the sink, a bottle of commercial herbicide and a box of rat poison. Both were practically empty. Mark grimaced. Doesn't that kill you instantly? No. Modern herbicides and rat poison are designed to act relatively slowly to prevent pets from dying immediately if accidentally ingested, but in high doses, mixed into their food. James shook his head. It causes multiple organ failure over several hours, extremely painful. And Linda simply left. He waited until the symptoms started, probably. Derek said he saw the lights on cabin 9 on until almost midnight. Then, around 12:30 a.m., he saw a car speeding down the road. He thought it was strange but didn't do anything. He figured someone had forgotten something and would be back. It was Linda running away. Exactly. And she had been clever. She cut the phone line to the cabin before leaving so the victims couldn't call for help. If it hadn't been for Derek hearing strange noises and going to check, they would all have died. Most likely. The doctors said that 1 more hour without treatment and it would be too late. We issued an APB for Linda Harrison immediately, James continued. But she had planned it well. The car she was driving was rented under a false name, paid for with cash. She had also used false documents to check into the cabins. So Linda Harrison wasn't her real name. It was. But she had created a secondary identity specifically for this reunion. She used the name Lisa Henderson for all official records. Why? Why do all this? James pulled out more documents. It took 3 days of intensive investigation, but we finally put the pieces together. Linda, along with the 4 victims, had belonged to a very close group of friends in the 70s. They had all attended the same college, lived in the same hippie communes. They were practically family. What happened? In 1979, the group was traveling across the country together in a van. They stopped at a bar in Nevada. They stayed up late drinking and having fun. Linda was the designated driver. She didn't drink because she was 3 months pregnant. James paused. And on the way back, she was driving carefully along the dark road when her friends started playing around, making a lot of noise. One of them, a man named Robert Chen, thought it was funny to cover Linda's eyes from behind, like a child's game. No, Mark murmured. The van went off the road and rolled over. Linda survived with minor injuries, but she lost the baby. And Robert Chen died in the accident along with his girlfriend. And the other 3, they had been injured but survived. And here's what destroyed Linda. In the days after the accident, while she was in the hospital grieving the loss of her baby, her friends conspired amongst themselves. They changed their stories, told the police that Linda had been drinking, that it was her fault. They invented details, supported each other to protect themselves. And it worked. Linda was charged with driving under the influence causing death. She spent 2 years in prison. She lost everything, her baby, her freedom, her future. Her friends went on with their lives. James showed old photos of the victims. Jennifer Wallace, now a successful elementary school teacher in Seattle. Michael Torres, owner of a small business in Portland. Sarah Blackwood, a therapist in Boise, all living comfortable and respectable lives. And Linda. He was released from prison in 1981, tried to rebuild his life, but never succeeded. He couldn't hold down a job because he had a criminal record. His family had distanced themselves, ashamed. He spent the 80s and 90s going from job to job, city to city, never putting down roots, and planning revenge for 17 years. That's how long it took her to finally act. She worked as a waitress, a supermarket cashier, a cleaner, always saving a little money. And all the while, she kept in casual contact with her old friends. A Christmas card here, a birthday call there, just enough so they wouldn't forget her. And then he arranged the reunion. In May 1996, Linda sent handwritten letters to each of them. She said she had bought a cabin in the mountains, that she wanted to make peace and leave the past behind, that life was too short for grudges. She invited them all for a weekend together, like in the old days. James showed copies of the letters. They were beautiful, emotional, and sincere. She talked about how she had been in therapy, found peace, wanted to forgive and be forgiven. And everyone believed her. Why didn't they suspect anything? Because Linda had always been the peacemaker of the group, a kind, understanding person. And because guilt is a powerful emotion, they knew what they had done to her. And part of them probably wanted to believe that forgiveness was possible. Then they came. Everyone came. And Linda prepared a beautiful meal, opened wine, made toast to their old friendship, and served them poison. Did the victims survive? Mark asked. 3 of them. Jennifer Wallace died in the hospital 6 hours after being admitted. Her liver had completely failed. But Michael Torres, Sarah Blackwood, and the 4th victim, a man named David Price, survived after weeks of intensive treatment. And Linda? James closed his eyes for a moment. That's when it got really dark. The Idaho Highway Patrol pulled her over 3 hours after we issued the APB. She was driving calmly on I-90, heading east. She didn't resist arrest. She didn't try to flee. She just got out of the car with her hands up. And did he confess? Immediately. He sat down in the interrogation room and recounted everything down to the smallest detail. How he had planned it for years. How he had practiced preparing the meal dozens of times to make sure it would be perfect. How he had calculated exactly how much poison to use to cause maximum suffering without instant death. She wanted them to suffer for hours. How she had suffered losing the baby, suffered in prison, suffered for 17 years knowing that the people who had ruined her life were happy and free. James pulled up the transcript of the interrogation. One thing she said struck me. The detective asked if she felt remorse, and Linda replied, "I felt remorse for 17 years. Remorse for not driving faster, for not stopping the car, for not yelling at Robert before he covered my eyes. Remorse for every choice I made that night. And while I was drowning in remorse, they were living their perfect lives. So no, I don't feel remorse for that. I feel relief." Was she convicted? 3 counts of attempted murder, 1 of first-degree murder. Received a life sentence without the possibility of parole. She was 52 years old, died in prison in 2018 from cancer. And the survivors? Michael Torres never fully recovered. He suffered permanent kidney damage and needed dialysis for the rest of his life. Sarah Blackwood developed severe PTSD and could no longer work as a therapist. David Price moved to Canada and changed his name. and none of them ever spoke publicly about what happened. James slowly gathered the documents. You know what haunts me most about this case? It wasn't the poison, it wasn't the meticulous planning, it wasn't even the cold revenge. It was the dinner itself. What do you mean? When we inspected the scene more carefully, we found photos that Linda had taken during the meal. She had positioned a camera on a tripod in the corner of the room with a self-timer. The photos showed everyone sitting at the table, smiling, raising glasses of wine and laughing. James showed one of the photos. See, everyone looks genuinely happy, like old friends reunited after years apart. And Linda is right there in the middle, smiling too, knowing exactly what she put in the food. That's psychopathy. Maybe. Or maybe it's just what happens when you torture someone long enough. Linda wasn't a born killer. She was a woman who had been systematically destroyed by people she called friends, and who spent almost 2 decades letting that destruction morph into something much darker. Do you have sympathy for her? James thought for a long moment. No sympathy, no. What she did was monstrous, no matter the context. But understanding, maybe. You can trace a direct line from the accident in 1979 to that poisoned dinner in 1996. Each betrayal, each year of suffering, pushing Linda one step closer. Could it have been avoided? What if her friends had told the truth in 1979? Absolutely. What if Linda had received proper psychological help after her arrest? Probably. But nobody did any of that. And 17 years later, 4 people ate a poisoned dinner in a cabin in the mountains. Mark was silent for a moment, processing the story. You said you had 4 stories. I have it. And the last one. James opened the 4th folder. The last one is different from the others because it doesn't involve madness or revenge. It involves family secrets and impossible coincidences. Story 4. The Secret of the Chimney, the Forgotten Treasure. This last call wasn't to 911, James began. It was a direct call to the precinct in 2004. I was a captain at the time, nearing retirement. And that call, that completely changed what we thought we knew about an old case. What kind of case? An unsolved murder from 1939, 65 years earlier. Mark raised his eyebrows. How does a call in 2004 relate to something from 1939? Let me start from the beginning, James said, lighting his last cigarette. In March 2004, I received a call from a woman named Patricia Brennan. She was cleaning out her grandfather's house, who had recently passed away, when she found something interesting. Call recording, 2:37 p.m., March 22nd, 2004. Patricia: Hello, I'm calling because I found something at my grandfather's house that may be related to an old crime. Secretary, one moment. I'll transfer you to a private investigator. James: Captain Sullivan. How can I help you, ma'am? Patricia: Captain, my name is Patricia Brennan. My grandfather, Robert Brennan, passed away 2 weeks ago at the age of 91. We were cleaning his house in Denver when we found a box hidden in the attic. James: What kind of box? Patricia: A locked metal box. We managed to open it and there's money, lots of money, and also documents, newspaper clippings about a 1939 murder in Colorado, and a handwritten letter from my grandfather explaining everything. James: Ma'am, I think it's best if I go there in person. I arrived at the house in Denver that same afternoon, James continued. It was a beautiful mansion, clearly belonging to someone who had amassed substantial wealth. Patricia took me up to the attic where the box was. What was inside? First, newspaper clippings. James spread copies across the table, all from the Denver Post, dated October and November 1939. The headlines read, "Settler killed in mountain cabin. Wife and children escape assassins. Stolen gold never recovered." Gold, exactly. And here's where it starts to get interesting. James read from one of the articles. James Brennan, 34, was brutally murdered in his isolated cabin in the mountains north of Denver on the night of October 14th. His wife, Mary Brennan, and their 3 children, Robert at 9, Sarah 7, and Emma at 5, escaped through the back window and spent 3 days in the woods before being found by hunters. Authorities believe the motive was robbery. James Brennan was known to have acquired a significant amount of gold coins before the Great Depression, and rumors about his hidden wealth were common in the area. Mrs. Brennan reported that 4 armed men broke into the cabin demanding the gold. When James refused, they killed him while the family fled. Despite the extensive investigation, neither the killers nor the gold were recovered. The Brennan family is currently under the care of relatives in Denver. So Patricia's grandfather was Robert, the 9-year-old boy, Mark said. Exactly. The son who witnessed his father's murder and then spent the next 65 years living with that secret. What secret? James pulled out a handwritten letter, yellowed with age but still legible. This here, Robert wrote this letter a few months before he died, knowing he didn't have much time left. He wanted the truth to be known. What did he say? James began to read. For whoever finds this, my name is Robert James Brennan, and I am 91 years old. I know I don't have much time left, and there is something that needs to be said before I die, something I have kept to myself for 65 years. My father, James Brennan, was not a victim of greedy criminals. He was a victim of his own greed. What the newspapers never knew, what even my mother didn't fully know, was that Dad had stolen that gold. I don't know from whom or how, he never told us. But I heard conversations late at night. I saw the fear in his eyes when strangers came into the area. Dad knew he was wanted. On the night they died, those men weren't random thieves. They had come specifically for the gold that Dad had stolen from them. And when he refused to return it, they killed him. My mother, my sisters, and I escaped through the window and hid in the forest. We spent 3 days outside. Mom kept us quiet during the day, only moving us at night. We had very little to eat, Emma cried silently. And Sarah kept asking when we would see Dad again. Mom just said soon, but I was old enough to know she was lying. When we finally returned, after Mom was sure the men were gone, we found the cabin destroyed. They had ripped up floorboards, ripped the mattress, destroyed everything searching for gold. Mom told us to wait in the woods while she buried Dad and cleaned up what she could. It took a whole day. But there was no funeral, no neighbors paying their respects, just Mom digging a grave alone behind the cabin. In the following months, we tried to continue living there. Mom hunted and fished, and I helped as much as I could, being only 9 years old. But it was difficult, very difficult. In the winter, we almost died of cold and hunger several times. That's when I found the gold. It was autumn of 1940, more than a year after my father's death. The chimney was becoming increasingly unstable, and I was trying to fix it before winter arrived. When I removed a loose brick, 3 sacks of cloth fell out. Gold coins, hundreds of them. Dad had hidden the gold in the chimney before he died. Those men never found it because they never looked there, and during all that time of suffering, the answer to all our problems was literally above our heads. I didn't tell Mom right away. I stared at those coins for hours, thinking, if I told her, she'd probably give them back. She'd try to do the right thing because that's who she was. But doing the right thing meant losing everything again. It meant that Dad's sacrifice, even if criminal, would have been for nothing. So I hid 2 of the bags back in the chimney and only showed one to Mom. I told her I'd found it hidden under a floorboard. She cried when she saw it. From relief, from sadness, from so much pent-up emotion. And although I knew it was wrong to lie to her, I didn't regret it. We used that single bag of gold to change our lives. Mom carefully sold the coins over several years, always with stories about family heirlooms. We left the mountains and moved to Denver. I was able to start my own business at 18 with the other 2 bags I had kept secret. Brennan Construction grew and prospered. I used the money I stole from my father to build something honest, something of value. I employed hundreds of people over the years, built schools, hospitals, homes for families. I turned blood into something better. My sisters never knew about the extra gold. Mom never knew I had kept 2 bags. Only I carried this secret, and I carried it like a heavy stone for 65 years. Looking back now, at the end of my life, I wonder if I made the right choice. Dad died for that gold. Those men probably died eventually too, never recovering what was theirs, and I built a fortune and a legacy on top of all that. I don't know if God will forgive me. I don't know if I deserve forgiveness, but I wanted the truth to be known. I wanted someone other than myself to know what really happened in that cabin in 1939. Gold gave me everything: education, opportunity, a life I could never have had. But it also gave me guilt I could never share. Every time I looked at my family, at my success, I saw those sacks falling from the chimney. I saw Dad's face that last night. I could hear the screams Mom tried to stifle as we ran through the forest. I built my life on stolen gold, hidden by a man who paid the ultimate price for his greed. And although I tried to do better, to use that money for good, I could never completely escape what it truly was: the legacy of a crime that destroyed my childhood. If anyone reads this and judges my choices, I accept that judgment. I only ask that you remember. I was 9 years old, watching my mother and sisters go hungry, and I had the chance to change everything. What would you have done? Robert James Brennan, January 2004. James slowly placed the letter back in the folder. The room was silent for a long moment. He kept this secret for 65 years, Mark finally said. 65 years, James confirmed. Well, he built a construction empire, raised a family, lived to be 91, and nobody ever knew it all started with stolen gold hidden in a chimney. What did you do with the information? We reopened the 1939 case, or at least what remained of it. Most of the original files were destroyed or lost over the decades, but we managed to piece some things together. Like what? James Brennan, Robert's father, had been briefly arrested in 1937 for possession of stolen property. Charges were dropped for lack of evidence, but it was on record. We also found witness accounts from the time saying that James had moved to the mountains very suddenly in 1935, as if he were fleeing something, and the men who killed him, never officially identified. But in a 1939 newspaper interview, Mary Brennan, the wife, described one of the attackers as having a foreign accent, perhaps Italian or Greek, and a large scar on his face. We discovered that in 1934, there was a major gold vault robbery in Chicago involving organized crime. One of the prime suspects was an Italian man with a known facial scar, but he disappeared before being arrested. So, James Brennan probably stole gold from the mafia. That's the most likely theory. And the mafia finally found him 5 years later. And the gold, how much was it worth? James smiled sadly. According to Robert's records, the 3 bags contained approximately 400 gold coins in total. In 1940, when he found them, they were worth perhaps 8,000, a fortune at the time, but he kept them and strategically sold them over the decades. When adjusted for inflation and the increase in the value of gold, we're talking millions. And he turned that into tens of millions through business. That's right, Brennan Construction is worth over $200 million today. It all started with stolen gold, blood, and a 9-year-old boy making an impossible choice. Do you consider him a criminal? James thought carefully. Legally, he should have reported the gold he found, especially knowing it was stolen. But morally, he shook his head. He was a traumatized child who saw his father murdered and was watching his mother and sisters starve to death. He did what he thought was necessary to survive, and then he spent 65 years living with the guilt. Exactly. Look, that's what fascinates me about this story. It's not about madness like the other 2. It's not about revenge like the 3rd. It's about how a single moment, A boy finding bags of gold in a chimney can define an entire life. What happened to the family? Patricia Brennan, the granddaughter who contacted us, was shocked by the revelation. She had always seen her grandfather as a self-made man, an example of American determination. Discovering that it all started with stolen gold and a secret kept shook her. Did she return the money? There was no one to return it to. The Chicago Mafia of the 1930s no longer exists. The original victims of the 1934 robbery were all dead. And legally, after so many decades and transformations of money, there was no valid claim. So she got to keep everything. After much internal debate, yes. But he established a charitable foundation in his grandfather's name, dedicating millions to programs that help families in extreme poverty, an attempt to make some symbolic restitution, I imagine. James closed the last folder. And the cabin in the mountains, it's still there. Patricia visited it once, said it was a surreal experience to stay in the place where her great-grandfather was killed and where her grandfather found the gold that changed everything. Does she still own the property? No. It was sold to the Forest Service. Now it's part of a protected nature reserve. The cabin was left as is, a crumbling structure slowly being reclaimed by the forest. In a way, it's a fitting monument to everything that happened there. James leaned back in his chair, his cigarette long since extinguished. The clock read 3:47 a.m. The rain had stopped completely, leaving only the occasional dripping from the gutters. "So these are my 4 stories, Johnson," he said. 4 cabins, 4 cases that have haunted me over 4 decades of service. Mark was clearly shaken. "Sergeant, these are the most disturbing stories I've ever heard, and you lived through them all." "I lived, I investigated, I documented, and I could never completely forget, because each one taught me something about human nature that I would have preferred not to know." "Like what?" James arranged the 4 folders in a row. "The first one, The Wild Man of Black Marble Mountain, taught me that civilization is more fragile than we think. Thomas Brennan didn't go to those mountains as a madman. He went as a young idealist seeking to live authentically. But without social structure, without medical treatment, without human contact, his mind simply crumbled. In 15 years, he went from a person to something less than an animal." He touched the second folder. The 1978 diary showed the same lesson, but documented in real time. Page by page, year after year, we watched a human being unravel. And the scariest thing, he knew it was happening. He had moments of clarity where he recognized his own madness, but he couldn't stop. The third story, Linda Harrison and the Poisoned Dinner, taught me that justice and revenge are very different things, but they can seem identical to those who have suffered enough. She wasn't a born psychopath. She was someone who was systematically destroyed by the very people who should have protected her. And for 17 years, that destruction simmered into something monstrous. Does that justify what she did? Absolutely not, but it explains it. And sometimes, understanding how monsters are created is just as important as punishing them. James touched the last folder. And Robert Brennan, he taught me that there are no simple choices when you're a traumatized child watching your family starve to death. He took stolen gold and lied about it. But he used that money to build something real, something that helped thousands of people. Was it wrong? Yes. Was it understandable? Also yes. And that moral ambiguity haunted him for 65 years. Which one was the worst of the 4, in your opinion? James thought for a long moment. Honestly, the second one. The diary, because at least in the others, there was some kind of conclusion. Thomas Brennan probably died in the mountains. Linda Harrison was arrested and convicted. Robert Brennan lived his life and left a confession. But the author of the 1978 diary, it was never found. He was never identified, never found, never received help. If he's still alive, and I highly doubt it, he's somewhere out there, completely insane, more animal than human. And if he's dead, His body is rotting in some ravine, unknown and unmourned. Either way, it's just sad. A total waste of a human life. Mark looked at the 4 folders. Are you going to keep these stories private now that you're retiring? I don't know. Part of me wants to lock them away in that filing cabinet drawer and forget about them. But another part thinks these stories need to be told, not as entertainment, but as warnings. Warnings about what? About what happens when people isolate themselves too much, when traumas are left untreated, when revenge replaces justice, when secrets are kept for too long. James gathered the folders. Cabins in the mountains seem like peaceful, even romantic places. Escape from civilization, simple life, connection with nature, but extreme isolation can be dangerous. Humans are social animals. We need each other to maintain our sanity. Would you never stay in an isolated cabin? James laughed bitterly. Not even if they paid me, kid. After seeing what I saw, I prefer the noise of the city, annoying neighbors, traffic jams, all that means I'm connected to other humans. And that connection, however frustrating it may be, is what keeps us human. He stood up slowly, his joints protesting. My shift ends in 15 minutes. Yours too. Go home, Johnson. Hug your family. Appreciate the fact that you live in a society with other people, with laws, with structure. And these folders, they'll go back into that drawer. James held them for a moment, but I documented everything too. I wrote down every detail, every interview, every thought. When I'm fully retired, maybe I'll publish it. A book, perhaps. Memoirs of a veteran police officer, or something like that. Will people want to read it? Go. Because these stories, however disturbing they may be, teach us something fundamental about ourselves, about our limits, our weaknesses, our capacity for both madness and resilience. James put the folders back in the drawer and locked it. But that's a discussion for another day for now. He looked out the window, where the first glimmer of dawn was appearing on the horizon. We survived another night. And that, kid, is always a victory. The 4 stories told by Sergeant James Sullivan tonight at the precinct are based on real cases investigated over 4 decades of police service. Some details have been altered to protect the privacy of the families involved, but the essence of each case remains true. If these stories disturbed you, made you thoughtful, or simply fascinated you, you can find more cases like these in our website resource. EBOOK. The ebook includes link in the video description, because sometimes the scariest stories are the ones that actually happened, and sometimes the most dangerous places aren't the violent cities or the dark streets, but the quiet, isolated cabins where people go to escape the world, only to discover that the greatest danger was within them all along. And isolation doesn't create monsters. It only reveals the ones that were already there, waiting in the shadows of the human psyche. Sergeant James Sullivan, retired.